Yay, thank you. Thanks, Amy. Another packed room, I love it. Who was here in the first session? Yay, oh my gosh, so you didn't hate it. I love it, okay. I promise that I'm not gonna repeat a slide. This is the only slide, and then maybe the workbook sign up. So there's not gonna be much repetition here. But what I wanna tell you, if you were not in that first session, is that I come from the development world. I've been in development/marketing/duties as assigned. How many people here do marketing and fundraising and all the things and outreach and everything? Okay, great, yeah. It's my people right here. So that's probably the most important thing to know about me. Also that I'm a mom and the Return Peace Corps volunteer. Because sometimes, is there anyone that was a Peace Corps volunteer, or AmeriCorps volunteer? Yes, okay, great. So usually when I'm in a group of nonprofit professionals, there's always someone that, at least a few people. And this presentation is based on my book, and I have 10 copies of my book with me, and I have a carry-on bag. So if you want to purchase my book, I would love it if I don't have to go home with the 10 copies. So see me after, see me at the happy hour if you want it. It's on Amazon, but I'll be selling it for like $10 cheaper, just so you know. We don't want Jeff Bezos to get richer, right? So if you want to tweet, Julia C. Social, also the hashtag is fundraising day, WI, and I haven't even had time to check my social feed, but I'm hoping that people are going to be tweeting. If you want the workbook that goes with this, I have this new little tech tool, a text tool, and you text the word workbook to 345345, give me your email, make sure that your email is spelled correctly, and then you will get that PDF workbook. I'll also give it to Lisa and Jen after, yes.
Is it the same as what you do?
Yes,
okay.
yes. This is the same workbook. What I found is that you get one really good piece of content and then you just promote it all the time. But this is the same workbook. And based on the book that I wrote. So today we'll talk about digital storytelling. I don't really have to convince you about the why of digital storytelling. I mean, you all understand that it's important, and some of you were maybe in Tammy's session, and I'm sure she did a fantastic job. I was really disappointed I couldn't see her. She's one of my favorite speakers and thought leaders. So if you have a chance to take her session this afternoon, you should. And then what types of stories work best, and then how to create and collect a system to craft these stories on digital channels. I like to start out with a story because it is a storytelling workshop. So I have a 10-year-old girl, she just turned 10, and I have a 4-year-old boy. And we struggle all the time to find movies that are appropriate for both of them that don't make me want to go insane. Like the Lego Batman movie, or I don't know what we watched, or Secret Life of Pets. Oh, so bad. So we really struggle with that. So my mom suggested, why don't we watch West Side Story? And I thought, oh, I don't know, my son's going to be climbing on the couch. My daughter loves musical theater, but I don't know if it'll keep her interest because it's from 1961, based on a musical from 1957. So I was not very sure about it. It kept both of their attention for almost the entire movie. So my 4-year-old had to go to bed, but that's fine. My daughter rapt attention to the screen, to every last note, every last moment, every last, the end, the horrifying, tragic end scene. And what I learned was that it's the message and not the medium. So we get so focused on the tools and the platforms and the channels and Facebook fundraising, and we talked a lot about that this morning, that we are not focused enough on what are we actually saying, and are we telling stories and not just sharing, promotional messages. So all that goes to say is the stories that we're telling and consuming make us, who we are. They create the world that we live in. And I think as nonprofit professionals, we have a responsibility to be sharing these stories, of course, in an ethical way, but sharing stories, giving people agency to share their stories and tell their stories, and telling our stories as well. Seth Godin is my favorite marketing thought leader, and he wrote a book. He's written a million books. One of my favorites is called Tribes, and I know that using the word tribe now, because it is Native Americans are taking it back. We're not going to be using the word tribes today, but he wrote a book called Tribes. It's very good. It's about knowing your audience, and when people read your story, do they say, oh, this is for me? This is what I believe in. This is my worldview. This resonates with me. So people like us do things like this. And it's okay to turn off the wrong people. If it's not people like us, that's okay. Maybe you want to learn more and become people like us, but if you're not a person like us right now, that's okay. This might not be for you. So how do we create stories that are for people like us? And then, not to go too much into the neuroscience of storytelling, and Mark talked a lot about storytelling this morning, and I'm certainly not a neuroscientist, but it's been shown that humans not only hear stories and pay attention to stories, they listen to stories and remember stories. So did anyone watch the fantastic TV show Chernobyl? Was it on HBO or Netflix? I don't remember what channel it was on. So, spoiler, it explodes. The reactor explodes, and it's a horrific tragedy. But it was still such compelling storytelling, even though you knew what was going to happen. Every step of the way, you knew it was going to happen. It was such compelling storytelling. And at the end, during the courtroom scene, the army, the grizzled army veteran turned to, or the scientist, the physicist, nuclear physicist turned to the grizzled army bureaucrat and said, they heard me, but they listened to you. So it's not enough to, buy a bunch of Facebook ads and splash your message all over some billboards. If people are hearing you, but they're not listening to you, then that's not going to get you anywhere. And that's what storytelling can do. And then of course, a storytelling workshop without this slide, is it even a storytelling workshop? When this happened, my husband said, oh man. He's like, you're going to do that quote in every workshop, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, any chance I have to quote Tyrion Lannister, yes, I'm going to do it. So he was so right, though. Think about how stories unite us much more than data, much more than statistics, much more than facts. So I would have been very remiss if I didn't include that quote. Not only that, we can show, if you need to get buy-in from your superiors, from your board, donors want stories. This is the kind of communication they want from us. And in the last session, I talked a lot about actually Dr. Adrian Sargent's research on why donors leave and donor drivers, what make donors give. And they leave because we're not giving them the information that they want. We're not showing them the impact of what we're doing, and they're not receiving information on who is being helped. So they want stories. So I'm going to give you my 3-part storytelling framework. If you see me talk, everything is in frameworks because I want you to remember it. I want you to be able to process this information at the end of it. So number 1 is collect. So you have to have a strategy for collecting your stories, a strategy for crafting your stories. And while I love alliteration, I just couldn't figure out another C word for share, but share your stories. And we'll talk about the different 3 parts. So how do you collect the best kinds of stories? This is your phase 1. You need to know your audience, bless you, and what is going to resonate with them. And this was something that we covered a lot in the first session. It's so important. It's not about what we want to tell and the story necessarily we want to get out there. And this is something I really struggle with a lot with clients. And we kind of go back and forth because they have a story they want to tell. They have a story they want to get out there. And certainly you can mold your story. You can incorporate your point of view, but it's really not about you. It's about your donors. It's about if your advocates, your supporters, whatever your goal is for the storytelling. So what do they value? Why are they interested in your work? And you might be surprised that some of the reasons that you think they're interested are not the reasons they're actually interested. So talking to your donors, talking to your supporters, understanding what drives them, what motivates them, what keeps them up at night, what excites them, what makes them passionate about what you're doing. And what I found in my work is there's 4 main types of stories that nonprofits need to collect. Now, of course, there's probably 300 stories, but we have an hour today. So we're going to go over 4 types of stories that you should have sort of in your toolkit, your storytelling toolkit. Oh, first one, impact story. Now, we can't avoid the impact story. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, Julia, I work at a hospital and we have HIPAA, or I work at a domestic violence organization. I work with youth. We can't share those stories. I have worked with organizations that have those challenges, and the key is you just have to get a little creative. You have to either tell the story from a staff point of view, tell the story from a volunteer point of view, from your point of view. You have to get the impact story. This is the most transformative kind of story, especially for fundraising. People want to see the impact. It doesn't have to be all tied up in a pretty bow, with a cherry on it. It really can be a real story. This is not data-driven. And, Dale Carnegie, who's the master advertiser, master marketer, he always says focus on benefits and not features. So not what you're doing, but the benefits of what you're doing. So the stories we tell, this is a typical story. Jane was on the street. Jane came to Rosie's place. Jane got some help. Jane left and fine. Okay, that's not a story. There's not really conflict. There's not really a character. It's not really telling me anything. It's much more of a message, and it's all about the features. It's sort of like she came and she went to our food bank, and then she took some ESL classes, and then she, got her secretarial degree, or she got back on her feet because of what we did. And it's not talking about how she felt. It's not talking about how she felt when she came in, how she felt when she left. It's not talking about the transformation that happened. So thinking about impact stories in a different way that's going to evoke emotion. So it's not about what happened, it's about how they felt. Another example is I worked with the American Childhood Cancer Organization, and they have a lot of chapters called Founding Hope chapters. And they're founded by parents who have a child with cancer or who have lost a child to cancer. So you can imagine the storytelling. The storytelling workshop, like I want to cry thinking about it, was really hard. But they wanted to share their story. But what they always said was, Johnny started having a stomach ache. We went to the doctor. Johnny was diagnosed with leukemia. Johnny had a lot of tests and chemo, and Johnny died, or Johnny got better, either one. But what I was trying to impart to them was, that's not, that's a horrible story, but that's not enough. Like, I want to know, what happened in your family? Like, I want to know more details. And they were completely willing to share. They just wanted to know, how can we get beyond this, a recounting of what happened, and actually get into the emotions and make it resonate. And then any knowledge gaps that people might have. This is something that I think ethical storytelling really does well. Where are the myths and misconceptions? Where are the stereotypes? Where are the knowledge gaps that people have about your cause? All of this will work. I should have said also, the slides will be coming to you. I'll send them to Lisa and Jen, and they're going to send out a big email with all of the slides, so you don't need to worry about that. This is Rosie's Place in Boston. They serve women who are in crisis. Have recently either gotten out of crisis. They do a lot of alumni stories. They would never feature a woman that is actually in their shelter, but they do a lot of storytelling around women that have survived and thrived and what they went through. And what I like about their storytelling is that when they collect these stories, they make it very clear to the woman that this is not what defines her. Talk about other things that are happening. Talk about other things that you're doing now. We do want to talk about the time in your life when you decided to come to Rosie's Place, but that is not your defining characteristic of your whole life. So giving people agency and telling them that this is not what defines you. Your story could help other people, but just assuring people that it's not the only important thing that they've ever done. And I think that's what holds us back from collecting stories, is that we don't want to be exploitative, we don't want to be manipulative, but understanding that sometimes people really do want to get their story out there. Back on My Feet, they simply share photos and a quote. So there's never any copywriting, there's not a whole lot of massaging, it's just talking to people about their experience, getting a direct quote, putting it on their website, which is so important. And they share just the impact story of a happy story, a happy ending. This is Amira, New England. I talked about this in them in the first session. They are an organization that works with survivors of sex trafficking in New England, which, if you ever read any of their statistics and any of their blog posts, you'd be horrified to know how often it happens. But the stories they share are always like little milestones, little wins. This woman is 60 days sober and we're celebrating her. Or, this woman just passed her GED or passed her driver's test, or whatever the big milestone is. And they never share identifying details. So thinking about ways you could use photography, stock photos, you want to be careful with stock photos. And also thinking about the way that you're telling your story visually and making sure that it does really represent the people that you serve. So, if you're serving predominantly people of color, or you're serving predominantly like white children or whoever you're serving, make sure your photos kind of reflect that, because it's just, it's more authentic and it's more real if you can't get photos of your actual clients, actual staff members. This is Best Buddies. They just share these little mission moments. This is a great way to do like kind of intro to storytelling. So think about if you have a mentor, mentee, if you have volunteers working with people, but the impact that's shown in this photo and this quote, it's not hammering us over the head with the impact. It's just showing us this little great moment, this little insider moment. And then really talking about the issue, tying it back to the issue, tying it back to the mission. But it doesn't have to be J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. It doesn't have to be this huge epic that spans decades. It can be a little bit of a moment, especially when we're telling stories on digital channels, because they're almost like little breadcrumbs. We're never going to tell one story to rule them all. We're never going to tell that one story that encompasses all of our programs, all of our services, all of our impact, all of our accomplishments. So picking out stories that are sort of like the connect the dots. Your organization is the connect the dots, and the little stories are the dots, connecting the dots for people. The second type of story, insider story. This is stories of people that work inside the organization. This is all of you, program staff, executive director, CEO. Why did they do it? What have they learned? What were some challenges that they faced? What has been their best experience? What has been the hardest? So the key is not to go up to them and say, hey, I want to hear your story. Like, when did you start here? And tell me everything that happened in the last 10 years. Just to ask some leading questions and thinking like a journalist. What would a journalist ask? Giving people the behind the scenes insight into the imperfect world that we all live in. So people want to see human beings in their communications. They want to see human beings in their storytelling. People don't connect with brands. They don't connect with logos. They connect with other people. And I know that all of you, you want to put your heads down. You want to work and you want to not get applause, and you want to work and you just don't want to be bothered. But in order for donors and supporters to connect with your organization, they need to be able to connect with you. Or if you want someone else to be the face of your organization, that's fine. But they need to see that there are humans behind everything. This is Macmillan Cancer Support. They do a lot of fundraising on Facebook, but they also do a lot of digital storytelling campaigns where they're trying to get stories from their fans and followers. But they always start with themselves. They always start with a staff story, with a volunteer story. So if you're going to have a storytelling campaign and try to get stories from the general public, you better start with yourself. No one wants to be the first person at the buffet. I mean, I do, but nobody wants to be the first person at the buffet. Nobody wants to be the first person to put the tip in the tip jar, So if you're doing any kind of trying to get stories from the general public, make sure you're sharing them yourself. Stories can also help establish credibility. And that's what we talked about in the first session. Establishing credibility is very important. Why should I listen to you? Why are you an expert? Why are you the one to solve this problem? So rather than just simply sharing a news article and saying, we were in the news, yay, our COO was interviewed, giving a little bit of backstory, telling me that we are credible, we know this issue, we are the people to solve this issue. Storytelling helps a lot with that. And then sometimes just talking to the people in your office, talking to your interns, talking to the people that, kind of are in the field, talking to anyone that's affiliated with your organization, sharing stories at board meetings. I'm going to give you an exercise to do that. Donor stories, so that's number 3. Donor stories are great kinds of stories to share and to tell. They're not the best for fundraising. I'm certainly going to be much more compelled to give you money based on an impact story, but when you're constantly trying to collect these stories, share these stories, create the bigger picture of your organization, sharing donor stories can be a powerful form of social capital, because sometimes people see themselves in the story. But it also is kind of a win-win, because the donor gets to be featured and the donor is really happy, and then you get a great story as well, and you might get some new insight into your donors. So why did they give? Why do they continue to give? What does this mean to them? And not just your major donors, right? So Charity Water did a campaign for its 5-year anniversary, and they called people that had just run a campaign for them, bless you, that raised $100 and talked to them. And they talked to kids who donated their birthdays and run lemonade stands. And they talked to people that raised a lot of money, but they wanted to share a wide variety of donor stories just to make it accessible, make it more accessible to people. So I don't have to think I'm Bill Gates to like make a difference. You know, I can make a difference just by raising money on Facebook, or I can make a difference just by asking people to donate instead of a wedding gift. Yeah.
Do you feel that some of those donor stories do inspire other women though?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I just don't, I think it's a piece of the puzzle. I don't think it's going to tip the scale. Like, I don't think I'm going to read a donor story and all of a sudden go to your website, but I think it's helping increase that credibility and trust and affinity with your organization. But it might spark something in someone that said, didn't even know you needed donations. Do you know that I have actually gotten that from people? Like, I worked with a food bank, and they said that people didn't know that they were not run by the government. They didn't know that they could actually donate. And they did tell a story of someone running a fundraiser, and people called them and said, I didn't know that we could give you money. And they're like, yes, please, give us money. So you never know what myths and misconceptions are going on until you actually tell the stories and find out. Doing donor spotlights, you can't read this until you get the slides. Sometimes just a quote and a photo. I like donor spotlight videos, or even better, maybe on Skype or just with your phone. I love donor spotlights so much more than what I call logo soup. You guys have seen logo soup. It's a bunch of logos. You have to have them on your race banner. You have to have them on your t-shirts. You do not put them on social media. Please do not put just a flyer of logos. No one wants to see that. I would much rather see, why did the donor give? I would much rather see the donor, see the owner of Honda North, you know, that gave you $5,000 for your silent auction, whatever it is. So think about the ways that you can tell a story when you're thanking your donors, even thanking your sponsors, especially for events. The fourth kind of story is the community story. These are people affiliated with your organization that might not be officially affiliated, so maybe community partners. I know when I worked at the domestic violence shelter, we would constantly talk to like the police, the firefighters, we would talk to teachers, we would talk to social workers, just none of us work in a vacuum. So sharing the stories of your community members that make it possible. And then if you have influencers, you know, not like Instagram influencers, but if you have legislators, city council people, anyone that can add that air of credibility to your organization, think about who you can get. And showcasing, like jumping on trending topics when you're sharing on social media, when you're sharing on digital channels, all of these trending topics are an excuse to share a story. Like National Volunteer Week, if I don't see everyone in this room posting something for National Volunteer Week, I will be mad. It's like a given. It's like we're giving you content. We're giving you a reason to share stories. It was just National Nonprofit Day this past weekend. We all should have been sharing, like, what does the nonprofit sector mean to us? Or why did we get started in this work? So think about cause and awareness days. Think about what's trending and what you can jump on, sort of spurring you to collect these stories. Volunteer spotlights, super, super low-hanging fruit, very easy to do, and anybody can do it. This is what I'm talking about. Rather than sharing a logo, the Pine Street Inn thanked Bob's Furniture by actually sharing a picture of the furniture that they donated and the story of the person that received the furniture. So the Pine Street Inn is a small organization in Boston where I live, and they are frequently doing that. They're showcasing their donor in a way that is a win-win kind of for everybody. So these are some questions to ask when you are collecting the stories. Doesn't matter who you're talking to. Think like a journalist. What is the hook? What is the angle? What's interesting? Think in your mind, what can you draw out that's going to be kind of a kernel and a seed and something that's going to spark someone's curiosity and someone's interest? You know, how did you feel? Talk about feelings, ask about feelings. Don't say what happened. Say, how did you feel when that happened? Or how did that make you feel? Just questions about feelings always work best. Okay, so we're going to do a really quick exercise. You might have already done this exercise before, but I actually really enjoy it. It's called the 6-word story. So who has heard of the 6-word story? Of course, Mark has. Oh, not many people. Okay, so maybe it'll be new. So, Mark, you're going to have to refresh my memory. What is that, the famous one? The really famous 6-word story that started everything?
For sale, never used.
Yeah, baby shoes for sale, never worn. That tells the story in 6 words. So I'm going to challenge all of you to tell a story in 6 words, but it has to be like this. It has to be like Katie steals to feed her kids. This is not your tagline of your website, so do not give me that. This is not like your annual report. This is not your mission statement. You can make up a name. In fact, please make up a name. There has to be a character. There has to be something that happens, okay? And then the call to action, you can change her story. That's not part of the 6 words. But if you have a call to action, you can add at the end. That's like extra credit. So if you think about the way that they structured that, emotional connection to a real person, compelling fact, and then the bonus at the end, not included in the 6 words, was the call to action. Okay, so what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you. We're going to take like 5 minutes, and we're going to work on our 6-word stories, and then some of you that are brave enough are going to share them out. So let's take 5 minutes to do that. Okay? All right, start. Okay, what time is it? It's hard. I'll go back to the other slide. Oh. It's so hard. All right, just one more minute. Okay, where are we with time? 1 more minute. Amy, I'm going to call on you. If no one's brave enough, I'm going to call on you. What's your mission? What do you do?
I work in Southeast Wisconsin.
Oh.
There's so many things that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Provide shelter, food.
Okay. Job training is one, right?
No, we don't. Well, at my particular location, you can interview
So,
there.
Salvation Army. So, who is the person? Who are the people that come to you for help, and what are they struggling with?
They're struggling with shelter, feeding themselves, keeping, the basics, human
Yep.
needs
Yeah.
for their family. So I was like thinking about, when everybody gets their disconnection notice for utilities,
Ooh.
and we'll help bring
So,
them back on.
yeah, you could say Katie needed a crib. I don't know, something like that. Katie.
Or like Dan, finds home not in car. Like,
Oh. No, wait. Okay, I'm going to kind of steal one from the last time I did this. It was something about Katie's last home was her car, something like that.
Okay.
So, or no,
So, like, I
Johnny's
was looking
last
at the whole
bedroom was the back seat, or I don't remember exactly what it was. Okay, so yeah, you could steal that. Katie's last home was her car, I guess, right?
True. We just did our point in time homeless counting for the small area I live.
Yeah.
Outside of those the 45 that live in our shelter, there were an additional 25 living out in cars and like boats that are covered for the year. You can get in the yard without people noticing.
Oh God.
But that for a city the size of mine, that was
Yeah.
a lot. Whereas in Madison, where you're from,
I think this is a hard exercise. Let's see what other people say. I'm always excited. No one ever wants to share those, so you've got that one in your pocket. Okay, let's wrap it up. Who would like to share? And I'm going to call on you if you don't volunteer. Yay, great. Okay, all right, let's hear it. Oh, by the way, who thought this was easy? Nobody? You thought I was going to say hard, yes. Who thought this was hard? Yeah, everybody. Okay, I know. We've got these long mission statements and these 45-page documents, and we got to distill one thing that we do into 6 words. Okay, what do you have?
An offender, John was spiritually restored.
An offender, John, was spiritually restored. Yes. Good. Isn't this hard? Who else has one? I want to hear them. Yes.
Adopting Dandy has completed Diane's family.
Oh, I love that. Completed the family. That's great. I love that. Yes.
Joy celebrated her dad's story today.
Joy celebrated her dad's story today. I love that. You can see you can get kind of a little bit of a picture, but it's really, I wanted you guys to do this because it's impossible. It's almost impossible to distill what we do down into 6 words. Do we have a couple more? Yeah?
Mine's a bit more grim, but
Okay, that's okay.
this is the story we're doing, and it's kids in crisis are killing themselves.
Oh. So that, to me, that's not a story. That's like a statistic. That, to me, is more, this is a problem, and Julia, you better pay attention to this right now. But I think to frame it like a story, you would need a character. So thinking in terms of, maybe what might make someone do that, or the shock value is certainly something that you can play with when you're communicating, for sure. You want to wake people up. You want to shake them and just be like, this is happening and please pay attention. But no, that's great. I think that's a good stepping off point. I would just have a character. Yes. Even if it's not a real one. Yep.
Gertrude desperately needed respite to cope.
Gertrude desperately needed respite to cope. Yes. Great. Yep.
Matt will hug his grandchildren someday.
Oh, Matt will hug his grandchildren. I love that. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, one more. Yeah.
Is it too vague? Watched fiance overdose, changed her life.
Yeah, I think that's not vague at all. Yes. I don't think that's vague. I think that's really compelling. So I wanted to share this exercise with you. Certainly I didn't invent this exercise, but it's something you can do with your board. So Mark, you may have done this with with boards before, because what it really gets them to do is distill down what you do into almost like a so what, who cares kind of mission. Why do we care? And if you've read, has anyone read Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. That's another fantastic marketing book, Made to Stick. They talk about compact and succinct messaging. That's what people remember. So we have so much that we want to share, and we have so much that we want to get out in the world, and we do so many things in our organizations. We probably all have different programs, different services. But to be able to distill your marketing message, your fundraising message down into that one story is really hard, but it's also really important. That's what's going to resonate. That's what people are going to remember. And I'm sure at the end of the day today, some of you are not going to remember anything else, but you'll remember some of the 6-word stories that you heard in here. So thank you for bearing with me with that. I really wanted to give you a little something to walk away with. So people always ask me, where do you find stories? So I gave you the 4 stories that you should be collecting, but you have to really, create this, although we hate to say the word culture of storytelling, but embed storytelling in everything that you do at your organization. Start your meetings, your volunteer orientations. Think about any time people are gathering for your organization, and think like a journalist. What's going to be interesting? What's going to pique curiosity and grab attention? And then also looking at events that are in the news or things that people are talking about. And Amira, New England, does that masterfully. If there's a story in the news about prostitution or sex trafficking or sexual violence, they are commenting on it, and they're saying, this is a real issue. And they're not afraid to talk about it. Like when Bob Kraft was arrested in Florida, and I live in Patriots land, okay? I live in like the land that people worship the Patriots more than they do anything else. And they were not afraid to say, this is something that happens all the time, people. Like, we shouldn't be surprised. And he's not convicted yet, but look around for signs in your community. They use it as like a learning experience, and they constantly are sharing stories based on things that are in the news because people are talking about them. And then look at all of those boxes in your office, like the print materials that have collected over the years, or the digital dust that Mark was talking about, the things in your hard drives, all those reports, and look at who your sponsors were, who your speakers were at past events. Look at old newsletters, look at old grant reports, look at old board lists. All of those could be seeds for stories, really. And all of those could be leads for people that you can talk to and get their story too. And then I'm hoping that you're getting thank you letters from either clients or donors or a school that volunteered, or a group of people that came and painted the shelter, or whatever it is, in-kind donors. Look at those thank you letters and see if they could lead to something else. And then, of course, donors, asking your volunteers, asking the people around you, trying to get leads just from the low-hanging fruit, and then trying to expand out beyond your what's right in front of you. So part 2 is the crafting. So we're hopefully collecting some stories, and if you get that workbook, it'll walk you through brainstorming where to collect stories. Crafting a story, in order for people to hear it and listen to it, it has to start with a hook. It has to grab my attention in some way and be compelling. It has to use the visceral, visual language, and go beyond a simple recounting of things that happened. And we've talked about that. So shake things up a bit. Start in the middle. Start with a character that's unexpected. Look at how the news covers stories. So WBUR, the NPR affiliate where I live, they write about nonprofits all the time, but they never write about it the way we write our press releases. We are having a 50th anniversary gala, and we're trying to raise this much money, and blah, blah, blah. No, that is not newsworthy. No news organization is going to cover that. They always start with a story. So look at whatever news outlets that you read and look at the lead of the story. That's the hook that's going to keep you reading. And I really think that my years spent studying journalism in the 90s, before Facebook and Twitter and all of that, really served me well, because the principles are the same. You have to grab people's attention. You have to give them a reason to be interested. Like, imagine if you were homeless. And this is the kind of language that I'm talking about. The longer I sat there, the more the chill cut to the bone. Evoking the smells and the sounds and the feelings and the noises and what people felt. Was it cold? Was it hot? Were you terrified to your very core? Like thinking about interesting language that you can use like that, that's going to grab attention and get people to keep reading. Amira, again, that time I almost died in Honduras. They're always having these headlines that grip you, and then starting stories very often, they start them in the middle so that you're compelled to read on. You want to know what happens. A relatable character. Oh, I don't know what happened to those slides, but sorry. But the visual, using that visual language, I think some great examples are, any book that you have read, you're certainly not going to read a book that just says, Julia walked into the room and started giving a PowerPoint presentation and, had her clicker and she walked away. You want that. You want to talk about these concepts that we're constantly working on in more relatable terms. So think about like Martin Luther King Jr., and how he talked about freedom like a rolling tidal wave and a stream. And he was always using analogies and metaphors so we could easily frame it. In our brain. And then also universal human experience. This is a really big one. So what I meant to put on this slide, or whatever got lost in translation, was that Charity Water and a lot of other successful organizations, they tell stories based on universal human experiences, like feeling terrified you're going to lose your house, or feeling scared for your child's safety. These are all universal experiences. We can all relate to them. And that's why oftentimes stories in the news, especially around charged issues like immigration or the refugee crisis, focus on one family, one child, one mother, because it's so much easier to relate to one person than it is to relate to the overall complexity of a crisis. And then part 3, sharing your stories. So you are collecting your stories, which I think is probably a third of it, and then crafting them. And the way you craft them is you craft them for the specific channel. So Andy Goodman of the Goodman Center is one of my favorite storytelling resources. It's the Goodman Center. He's a fantastic email newsletter that he sends out all the time, and he's written some books. But he says that your stories are the gold, and you mold your stories depending on where you're sharing them. So if you're sharing them at a board meeting, that might be different than if you're sharing them to a news outlet, or if you're sharing them on Instagram. So you're molding your story, crafting your story based on where you're sharing it and the context in which you're sharing it. Where you share depends on your goals. And we went through this morning, but people ask me all the time, should I be using a website? And should I be using Facebook, not a website? Should I be emailing? How many times a week should I be emailing, or a month? Should I be blogging? Should I be on Twitter? Should I be on Instagram? And asking me that question without giving me any context is honestly like me walking up to you, and you don't know me, and I'll say to you, where should I build a house? Where do you think I should build a house? And you would say, I have no idea. Do you like 8 months a year of winter? Because then Boston, which is where I'm from. Do you like the ocean? Do you have kids? Do you want a school district? So there's all these things that we have to ask before we can say, where are we sharing our stories? So there's a lot more work that has to be done there. What do you hope to achieve? What do you want people to do? Is it fundraising? Is it advocacy? Is it signing up for something? Is it changing hearts and minds? Is it sharing far and wide? What is it you want people to do? And then it also depends on your audience. Who's consuming this? Who are you trying to target? Where do they live? Where do they spend their time? Do they open email? Do they go to your website? Do they read blogs? I know a lot of nonprofits are starting podcasts, storytelling podcasts, telling the stories of their clients, their impact stories, because they know that a lot of people consume podcasts. Like something like 35% of US adults have listened to a podcast. So really figuring out where your people are, and also tailoring your message, or thinking about what you can do reasonably with your small capacity. And then how much time do you realistically have? So I'm not telling you to do all the things and share all the stories on all the platforms. Think about realistically, what you can do that's going to help you accomplish your goals. What kind of budget do you have? What kind of resources do you have to share on these platforms? We all have a website, I would hope. Stories should be first and foremost on your website. Think about how people find information. Every time I'm in a hotel, it's funny, I always say, okay, Google, what's the weather today? Because I have a Google Home. And that's what I do every morning. I do it every time I'm at a hotel. I'm like, oh, there's no Google Home here. I can't do it. You can search. I know, it's such a first world problem that my husband makes fun of me. But that's how people are searching. You're using Siri or Alexa, and if you don't have a website and you don't have like your best information, your best foot forward prominent on the website, people are not going to search for it. They're not going to look around. They expect instant results now. And you can even donate via Amazon Alexa. You can donate via Google Home. So if you have any of those devices, I encourage you to test them out at your house. Say, okay, Alexa, make a donation. And you can probably name several different charities. It's actually pretty cool, so definitely test it out. But just think about the way people are consuming and finding information. Okay. Prominently featuring on your website, of course, this is Pine Street Inn. Colors grab attention. Anything fun, anything kind of unexpected. Bow ties, right? Always work, Mark. Think about the image that you want to convey with your story. Pine Street Inn, you know, they really deal with people in crisis, but they want to convey that mentality of what's possible and their vision for the world. Those are some organizations that share really great stories on their website. When you get the slides, you can take a look. Also in your email. So what St. Jude does, they send a weekly patient story, always the same format, always branded, picture, little blurb, and then click to read more. Very simple, done. And I don't read it every week. I mean, I don't open the email every week, but it's a constant reminder. It's a constant reminder that they're there, of their impact. So I'm always thinking about them. This is Amira. They always send an email from their executive director that's written like it's from a friend, sharing a personal story. So email does not need to be 7 columns and graphics heavy. In fact, if it's just very simple, it's probably going to get read, and it's much more likely to get someone to take an action. If you're asking for 27 actions in an email, then people will get analysis paralysis. So simplifying your emails is always better, and sharing stories in your email. Because who gets emails with stories? Nobody. We all get so much spam and so many sales emails that to get a beautiful email like that cuts through the clutter. And social media, which we talked about this morning, so I won't go through it in too much detail, but having eye-catching visuals and having some kind of call to action. It doesn't have to be donate. It doesn't actually have to be an explicit call to action, because if you think about the way social media is framed, there are implicit calls to action like and comment and share. So social media in and of itself is already asking someone to do an action. So even if you post a story that's just going to make people feel good, that's fine. You can get shares or comments. Engagement is fine. If you are asking people to donate or to sign up for something, be very, very specific. See how this says? It's easy to make a gift today. Click on the donate button below. You know, it spells it out for people. Don't assume that they're going to know what you want to do. You know, I love this. Your $25 will be matched. Even giving people even more specifics. Knocking down any kind of obstacles that they have to participating when they're all excited about a story. This one, though, it doesn't even ask for anything. It just wants comments, shares, likes, creating that community. I see social media as a way to build a community that becomes irrationally passionate about your cause and your organization. So it might not be able to be measured in the beginning in terms of like direct ROI, return on investment, but community building and communicating with your donors is never a waste of time. So this is Susan G. Komen, Florida. They use Instagram stories. They go behind the scenes. They showcase the funny things that they're doing at work. They showcase behind the scenes at events. And as we know, we can now raise money via Instagram. So I think it's important to know about a lot of these tools. Don't feel like you have to adopt them all immediately, but see where your story might fit best and might best be suited on digital channels, and then tell it there. Maybe Facebook Live. Maybe you do events. Maybe you do something that would really translate well. You have an announcement, or you want to comment on the news. And you can also raise money with Facebook Live. So there's a million platforms to use. But what do we have, 5 minutes left? Yeah, okay, so I do want to take questions. So all of these channels are just used to amplify what you're doing. Another way to amplify it is with social media advertising. So we didn't talk about that much this morning, but social media advertising can spread your story even further to more of the right people. Now we're talking about getting the story in front of the right people, not spraying it out to a million strangers who might not care. So you can upload your donor list and try to get your impact story in front of people that are already donating to you. You can upload an event list. You can upload your email list, people that have raised their hand and said they want to hear from you. So I'm not talking about spraying out your message, yelling at strangers. But there are ways that you can use these channels to specifically target people that want to hear your stories. Those are a couple of examples. So once again, if you want to get the workbook, go to text this number. If you already have it, then thank you. And I would love to take some questions or comments in the last few minutes that we have. Yes.
I have some staff members who are really uncomfortable with using like emotions in stories.
Oh, yes.
Because they feel like it's projecting or lying or like we just are very uncomfortable with feelings in our office.
Okay.
Like how we're trying to use like more quotes because then it's coming directly from
Yes.
whoever we're working with. But do you have any like tips or tricks on changing that relationship with using emotions in our story?
So are they uncomfortable with sharing their own stories? Is that what they're uncomfortable with?
No, just like when we write appeals or do things on social media, they don't want us to say that, like we protect land, so they don't want us to say that the landowner was terrified that their farm would never be a farm, even though that is really like what is compelling the landowners who donate land.
Yeah, okay.
But using strong emotion words really scares them.
I think the problem is that we need to make someone feel something.
Yeah.
And if we're not using strong language, people are just going to be apathetic. Right. So I think, the way I would handle that is I would just say, we want to be careful and cognizant and definitely not exploitative in the stories that we're telling, but we also really need to grab people's attention. And then I would experiment and see if you share that story, if you get blowback from donors or board members, which you probably won't. But just say, why don't we maybe try this and then see how it works and then see if it gets more engagement or it gets more open or it gets more donations. And then it's kind of like baby steps. It's almost like trying it a little bit, maybe just trying it on Facebook and then maybe trying it in an email and then maybe trying it on your website and then maybe you can do it, in a video or something like that. Does anyone else have any advice? Like, anyone else suffer from not wanting to use feelings, staff members not wanting to use strong language? No?
Maybe that will be the evidence.
Yeah. So everybody else does. I know. And ask them what stories they like and what resonates with them. So maybe everyone can kind of collect marketing materials or newspaper articles that they like, and then you can kind of see what the threads are in common. Anyone else? I know we're like running low on time. Okay, you all want to get to lunch? All right, well, thank you so much. I'll be up here after.